The report that International Refugee Rights Initiative published today is about conflict dynamics related to the refugee presence in northern Uganda. We spoke with refugees from South Sudan, with Ugandans living around the refugee sites and local leaders to understand better the dynamics of that refugee presence there. We wanted to understand the relations between refugees and the host community, the relations within the refugee community between different refugee groups, but also cross-border dynamics that affect those refugees. And so over the last months, we talked to over 260 refugees, local leaders and host community members.
Personally, my understanding of refugees is based on my being a refugee before, so my relationship with them is natural because I understand who a refugee is and what their needs are.
They have that heart of welcoming the brothers and sisters.
I have very many friends who are refugees, and wherever we meet with them, we interact freely and we appreciate each other.
Overall, refugees and members of the host community told us that they had good relationships. Ugandans living around the refugee sites have showed a high degree of solidarity, also because they have been displaced themselves in the past, and despite the various challenges that they have themselves. But there have been some issues that have affected the relationship between those two communities, particularly the issue of natural resources, wood, grass and poles for construction. That has created some tension between the two groups.
They go from here to access that firewood from that neighborhood where they get problem. They say, oh, why are you coming here? You are benefiting that side. Why don't you remain there? That's where the issue of rape came in, the issue of assault, the issue of threatening these women.
You can agree with someone very well. You can dig like only for 1 year, and that place has been staying for long without digging. When you dig for the first time, you will harvest nothing because the soil is still very hard. Something cannot come very well. When you plan that, like to come back next year, you'll find that the person has taken away and sold to another person.
The shortage of land for refugees is very serious because they are supposed to be self-sufficient, but they cannot cultivate in a plot of 30 by 30. That means there's a need to get them land for cultivation.
One issue that often came up in our discussions with the host community was the issue of land. They confirmed that they gave land willingly and without compensation, but there are clearly unmet expectations and frustrations about the lack of transparency of the process and the lack of consultations about decisions that have been taken that affect them. Members of the host community told us that indeed there have been increases in access to services and that they also benefited from the refugee presence. But they had hoped that there would be more for them. And in particular, the issue of jobs has often come up in our discussions. Both refugees and members of the host community were frustrated about the fact that it was very difficult for them to access jobs around the refugee presence.
Bronzi Adjumani and Lamwo paper bati kiodua eko adivadi ba eti kareziga anile dikola koma ki dokana amalaka ki oludi amadi fudri ndara disikola amadisa ke su benefiti a yankwe ka kotro e benefiti a yesulere ebuide ka office ya e.
The second topic of our research was the relation between different refugee communities. And overall, in most settlements, there weren't any major problems between different refugee communities. But there were notable exceptions. In Rhino Camp settlement, for example, in June 2018, there was a major incident that cost the life of 4 refugees after what seemed to have been a minor scuffle between different individuals, escalated along ethnic lines. And those incidents have happened, similar incidents have happened in other refugee settlements.
With the Nuer and Dinka, we have problem because when we say together, and then there's some much more other thing. Michela Shuya Lobada, Bajibo Michela, and Nama Bagot Kwe.
Many of the communities, before they came to the refugee settlement, they lived pretty isolated from each other, and they have had hostile relationship between themselves, and that has been carried over up to the time they're here. So it is so easy for personal conflict to escalate or to degenerate into communal violence.
Clearly, there is a cocktail of frustration, traumas, unemployment, and grievances related to the conflict in South Sudan that have a high potential of spilling over into such violence incidents.
When one of the clansmen was promoted from South Sudan, they celebrate here, and some of the clan become envious.
We also documented cross-border issues that affected refugees. In particular, allegations of kidnappings, allegations of recruitment, and of individuals involved in the conflict in South Sudan visiting the refugee settlements in Uganda. And while those issues are surrounded by secrecy and it was hard to confirm such allegations, we did receive credible allegations in most of the districts that we visited that indeed recruitment is taking place.
There is this kind of suspicion, mutual suspicion of spying on each other or having kind of friction based on these political differences. So yeah, there are people who even come and say, I was almost kidnapped, people come and knock my doors, and I feel threatened, I feel insecure, sometimes I don't sleep in my own house, I have to go and sleep outside. So yes, a number of cases I've heard about that.
Given the protracted nature of the conflict in South Sudan, the continuous arrival of refugees, and the pressure on funding of the refugee response in Uganda, the situation is not going to improve. So there's need to prevent conflict. There's need to address the tensions that are there, and there's need to increase the capacity to detect early warning signs of possible tensions around the refugee presence in northern Uganda. And that has to be done especially by local leaders. Refugee leaders and community leaders have to work hand in hand to address those issues and create space for dialogue about such tensions. But also the police and local government have to be supported in their capacity to respond to those issues. This is only possible when there's money, international sharing of responsibility. International partners have to support international NGOs and local partners to ensure that they can build programs related to peaceful coexistence that support the refugees and the host community to address their problems and to ensure no incidents take place.